remember as a young girl climbing up on the vanity in the hall bathroom so I could get really close to my face, and I would look as deep as I could into my own eyes and wonder who I was behind the green irises. I knew there was something else there. When we're young, we're curious and we take time to think about things like that. Then we grow up. We spend our days paying bills, checking phones, navigating our physical world, but we still feel this kind of deep, quiet pull toward that something else, that something spiritual. We tell ourselves, well, I'll slow down tomorrow, or certainly I can take time over the weekend. We feel like the daily demands run our lives, but what if what really runs the show is actually behind the veil, beneath the surface? What if you could finally discover that something else that you felt when you were young?
Well, that's exactly what we're exploring today. The two worlds in which we live, one we're very familiar with, and the other is waiting to be discovered.
Welcome to Becoming You, where we apply spiritual wisdom and truth to your everyday life. If this is your first time joining us, thank you for being here. And if you have been with us before, thank you for coming back. You'll notice that we don't get caught up in political dynamics or the polarity and the division of our times. Here, we focus on the cause of those dynamics, the true origin of the outcomes in your life and how to engage in your life in a much more conscious way. I'm Terry Hasty.
And I'm Haydn Hasty. Before we map out these two worlds, which we call the horizontal visible and the vertical invisible, let's look at the bigger picture. What is the actual evolutionary process that's going on? What is really going on in our lives? Of why do we take birth? Why are we human beings on this planet? And from a higher perspective, the goal of life, which is the goal of the evolutionary process itself, is the divinization of planet Earth, essentially bringing heaven to earth. But sometimes we find ourselves in hell, which is generally of our own making, and we can't find our way out. When I got divorced at age 39, I filed a lawsuit for custody of our two children, a lawsuit that I would lose. And when my attorney did call me and he gave me the news that I had lost the lawsuit, I could hardly breathe. Everything that I considered myself to be was erased in that second. And I was in a state of shock for what was going to feel like months, if not several years. I had access to absolutely nothing that would give me any comfort, and my horizontal physical life had been destroyed. And this happens through the interplay of two main forces, and those forces are truth and ignorance. So this is part of the bigger picture of understanding how this process of our life unfolds.
And we all have those events that I remember specifically two times where I was literally taken to my knees, but we also have events that figuratively take us to our knees. And without access to a greater understanding of the forces at work, it feels like there's no way out and there's certainly no way up. We see this on a global scale today, a sort of collective collapse that's triggered by profound ignorance. And the trick about ignorance is it doesn't know it's ignorant. We don't know, we don't know. I mean, I've, argued till the cows come home that I'm right about something before, only to find out that I was not. But at this bigger level, we can see the role that ignorance is actually playing. But the divine accomplishes kind of this grand evolution through you. So you mentioned divinization before, Hayden. Divinization is the act of the divine realizing itself in physical form, which is you, which is me, which is all of our listeners. It's you remembering who you are while you are inside a physical body, not just at the point of ascension or death, whatever your belief system is around that. It's remembering that you are that in this current form.
Well, that's the evolutionary process at work. That you could say that remembering or that realization of the truth of who you are.
And if this is something you'd like to explore further, Hayden and I would love to have you join us at the Omega Institute, where we'll be July 31st through August 2nd. It's in Rhinebeck, New York. And it's going to be a wonderfully immersive weekend around this content of how do you become who you truly are and how do you manifest that in your daily life. The details about it are in our show notes right here, and you could also go to our website at truthspringasheville.com.
So we're still hanging around this little bigger picture before we talk about the two worlds in which we live. But, the question is, how do we come to understand this? How do we get there? How do we master the process of our life? So let's take a look at a spiritual map, so to speak, of what it is that's going on and how we can start learning about this.
I really like breaking it down, Hayden, so that everyone can visualize it and hear it easily, because it's not nearly as difficult as struggling through in the dark. Once we get the map, then we have a way to actually journey. And we can think of it as being three parts of the journey.
Now, of course, it's really important to say that the infinite or the divine is not linear, but it's helpful to try to figure out how to describe this so that any of us can take advantage of this knowledge and wisdom.
Well, and whether you're trying to learn how to drive a car or learn a new language or learn how to reach that true essence of who you are, it always starts with knowledge. So first there is knowledge, truth. This is the starting point. And at first, I know my mind has certainly encountered this and still does. The mind thinks truth is an object outside of itself. It's something I have to go out there and find, like a map of the ocean to study. And we wonder, where is it? How do I learn it? Who do I learn it from? Why should I learn it?
Where's it going to take me?
Exactly. So our first step is knowledge and truth. Again, the map of the ocean to study. Second, there is action. And this is where you create a spiritual practice, a discipline, or a yoga. In our culture anyway, I don't know very many people who do this consistently. Most stay trapped kind of in the drama of daily tasks. We try meditation retreats, teachers treating it like a search for a missing piece. But this stage is really a crucial part of our development because it's where we finally begin to swim in the ocean, not just look at the map. And then there is the becoming. And this is where you become the ocean.
And so this overview, this greater perspective sets us up for a great understanding of the two worlds in which we live, the horizontal and the vertical.
So even though we live in these two worlds simultaneously, the mind rarely notices or understands this. We're spiritual beings, the vertical, but we live in a physical world, the horizontal. And the horizontal is actually the vertical in physical form, evolving to the realization of who and what it is. You might think of the horizontal, your daily life, as a distorted version of the perfection that resides in the vertical. They aren't separate, but let's look at how to understand them a little bit better.
Yeah, let's make sure that it's real clear what they are. So I tell you what, let's do. You give a word in the horizontal, and I'll give its counterpart in the vertical. How's that?
Sounds good.
Okay.
So let's start with visible.
Invisible.
Physical.
Metaphysical.
Material.
Spiritual.
Here's one of the best ones: experience.
Existence.
Effect.
Cause.
Ignorance.
Truth.
Unconsciousness.
Consciousness.
Time.
And this is a big one: eternity.
Horizontal.
And vertical. So there you have both those worlds in which we live simultaneously. You live in a visible and invisible world. You live in a world of material and spiritual. So this is really important to understand. Let's just now state what the horizontal is: visible, physical, material, experience, effect, ignorance, unconsciousness, time, and horizontal. And the reason that they appear to be separate, that these two worlds are separate from one another, the reason it looks that way is because we don't know anything about the vertical. We know so very little about it. Now remember what the vertical is: invisible, metaphysical, spiritual, cause, truth, consciousness. It is timeless or eternal, and that's the vertical.
So your outer world is really a mirror image of your inner world, the vertical. If you want to change your outer daily life horizontal experience, you have to shift your vertical axis, and you actually have to learn about it in the first place so you even know it exists rather than just feeling
Lost.
lost. Yeah.
Right. And always in a state of confusion. But when you take birth, you lose your connection to the vertical. It's like a designed amnesia. And when this happens, of course, the mind thinks that it's its job to invent or find the truth, that it's got to figure out what's going on, not knowing that the map of the ocean, so to speak, or the knowledge or truth has already been created and is there. It doesn't know that.
Well, I think because the mind thinks it has to invent the truth. It has to find it. So it creates what we call cuts. It's an acronym for what the mind does, which is it creates choices, actions, decisions, ideas, concepts, understandings, and thoughts. And all of that, if your cuts are unconscious, they create unintended, even like messy outcomes, undesired outcomes. If they're conscious, they create intended outcomes, things that you enjoy. It's not your belief in things that holds you back. It's your rigid belief about things, whether it's God or love or yourself. That's what creates the problem.
Okay, so now with that understanding of what the horizontal and the vertical are, now we can get to these axes and start talking
And
about
just
them.
to get a visual, you could think of them as two lines, that work together, like even a gyroscope, if you can picture that.
The outer spinning ring is your horizontal plane. That's everyday life. People, expectations, uncertainty, the feeling of never quite being enough. And every single one of us, we try to bring order and rhythm to this outer chaos in order to get our life straightened out. But look at that chaos from the center point of the gyroscope. This is where the vertical axis pierces straight through the middle of the horizontal wheel. And from that vantage point, you can ask yourself, looking out there at the plane of your world, in other words, your cosmos, the world in which you live, what needs to be eliminated? You're the designer of your world. What needs to go? What needs to be included in your cosmos that currently is not included? I mean, it's really a question of energy. What is consuming too much energy in your cosmos? What is not getting enough energy, enough attention?
And another question I've just posed to you, Hayden, is why should I even pay attention to this? I have things happening. I give them energy. I don't give them energy. What's the value of paying attention to this axis of the plane and then the center?
Well, it's one of the secrets to your existence, which is it is the vertical, the invisible, that is running the show,
Mm-hmm.
that is controlling the outcomes out in the horizontal plane. So it is the center of the gyroscope that really is the most powerful place to be.
And if we don't pay attention to that and we give all our energy to that kind of spinning outer ring, ignoring the steady vertical center, we really end up with a great deal of imbalance, uncertainty, unintended outcomes, like we said before. So we try to minimize our suffering on the outside, but we don't ever touch or come in contact awareness of the inner cause.
Right. I'll just marry someone else.
There you
This
go.
didn't work out. I'll just marry somebody else. That's got to be better. But the problem is, I don't change that inner core or that inner condition that produced those circumstances in the first place.
That's really what causes the confusion is we're out there on the periphery, but the truth is there at the center in the invisible, in the vertical. But you can notice the relationship between the two. The vertical axis has no reason to even exist without the horizontal plane for it to balance or to ground it. What's the point, for example, of just knowing about love conceptually? Wouldn't you rather experience love, in your physical life?
That's what the physical, visible, horizontal world is for. It is an eternal garden in which the eternal child plays in order to realize, the truth of who he or she is. Notice on a daily basis that all of us, we seek and even chase affirmation on that outer spinning horizontal wheel. We seek, but we rarely find.
That's why you can't find it in another person because it's not out there. You can't find it in a job. You can't find it in a car. You can't find it in
In
any,
money,
yeah, in any
it,
kind of
it's
possessions.
not there. It's only temporary. The vertical is where you gain the wisdom and knowledge to become a master of your life and the dynamics and forces that are creating the outcomes of your life. Knowledge and wisdom are not functions of doing. That's the horizontal. They are functions of being. That's the vertical. The vertical axis is where the seeking stops. It's where you find and realize the truth of who you are. And I'll say it again, doing is horizontal, being is vertical. And this is part of the secret to life's puzzle. Your vertical alignment or lack thereof is what's running your horizontal life. So when your vertical is unknown, in chaos, in confusion, I promise you, your outer life will reflect that.
It reminds me of a conversation I had this morning with a client, and we talked about being in touch with that axis, that center, that balance. That everything has an axis. The chair you're sitting in has an axis. The earth has an axis, and so do we as individuals. The essence of each individual, it's the axis, the one that does not take birth and it doesn't die, and the profoundness of that understanding, the purpose and meaning of your singular life in the span of all time and all the experiences of your eternal self. And there's just so much more going on than what you see on TikTok or what you are trying to acquire or what you're trying to even um, be in your daily life. There's so much more going on than meets the eye, but most people's lives, are consumed by their horizontal, giving little, if any, attention to the invisible, to the vertical. And we constantly seek to minimize pain, certainly, and suffering, but we don't really look for the cause of the suffering.
And therefore you can't
Right.
eliminate the suffering. The horizontal is the effect, and vertical is the cause.
So the horizontal represents everything that's physical and visible. It contains your experiences, but it also contains your unconsciousness and your ignorance, and it holds time.
Right. But
Yeah.
the vertical axis is the essentially the vertical line that runs right through the middle of your horizontal plane to compare it to a gyroscope. And without this vertical axis, there could be no horizontal plane. And the vertical axis, as we mentioned before, has no reason to exist without the horizontal plane. The two worlds in which we live coexist in a reciprocal balance.
Right. It's
They,
not one or the other. We're not negating physical life.
no, they are
Yeah.
two movements of the same aspect. We must unify these two worlds in our life, the horizontal and the vertical. So, the vertical, which contains the truth and consciousness, is where you find and experience and realize the truth of who you are. Vertical is where you gain that wisdom and knowledge to become a master of your life and the dynamics and forces that are creating your life, as I said before. And I want to say it again, knowledge and wisdom are not functions of doing, they are functions of being. So the question is, how do I be? How do I become?
Mm-hmm.
And so doing is horizontal, being is vertical. And that's part of the secret is learning how to reside in the vertical while dealing with and living in physically, visibly, materially in the horizontal.
Well, it really is a journey of aligning these two worlds until the space between them disappears and they are operating in concert. But my vertical is more in the front, in the driver's seat, and my horizontal is serving that vertical conscious truth essence of who I am rather than the physical trying to be in charge. So, as these contracting forces of a lifetime exert pressure on your being, the distance between you and the divine lessens until the space disappears and you realize you were always it.
Well, see, it helps understand that all of those dynamics out in your everyday life that exert pressure on you from the moment you get up in the morning to the time you go to bed, what is the purpose of all that? It is driving you to center. It is causing or attempting to cause you to move from your outer life to your inner life.
Sometimes it's forcing us.
Sometimes you'll get whacked on the head out of the blue and
Yeah.
your whole life changes.
So I really want to leave the listeners with two foundational pillars from this conversation today. Number one, who are you? You are a spiritual being, the vertical, using the physical world, the horizontal, to experience your ultimate truth, the truth of who you are. And number two, how do you move to the vertical? You really have to actively choose to learn about the vertical you, what's behind those irises, whatever color your eyes are. Learn to see with your heart, not just your eyes. The more you understand and practice the vertical, the more beautifully and perfectly your horizontal life actually reflects that, rather than reflecting uncertainty and chaos and self doubt. It can reflect that beautiful essence of who you really are.
Well, it's mathematically proportional. As your consciousness is, so will the force and will in your life be. Now, let me say that differently. As your vertical is, so will your horizontal be. So, if your life in the physical, material, emotional realms of your life is unpleasant, has caused you unhappiness and dissatisfaction with your life, it's about changing your vertical because your outer life, I promise you, will reflect that. It is a mirror image of that inner condition.
Like going through a divorce or the death of a loved one or losing a job, to be able to come at it from the vertical, not just from the event itself.
Well, that was part of my very deep learning from the loss of the custody suit that I mentioned early in the conversation. And I was beginning to learn that the object of my life was essentially to, I call it verticalize. I realize I'm making up a word here, but to verticalize your horizontal. So, as I said, I had filed a lawsuit for custody of the kids, and I lost the first lawsuit. I would file another one several months later. But I went into a state of shock that was going to last months, even several years. And my horizontal physical life, as I knew it, my experience was it was destroyed in a second. I did everything I could to reconcile, to rectify, to resurrect my horizontal, my circumstances, my loss, not only of my children, but also of my identity. And nothing was going to work. What I could not know at that time, but was going to learn, what I did not understand at that time, but was going to understand, was that the other world in which I lived, the vertical, was behind the scenes, arranging almost to every minute detail all these circumstances that, from the horizontal point of view, it appeared to be a disaster. So unjust. This isn't fair. How could this happen? But from the unfolding of the vertical, I was well on my way to learning to live a life that I simply could not even have dreamed of at the time. It's just that some of the barriers had to be removed before that could happen. And that's what the vertical is capable of doing. So I was being forced to learn
And
that
those barriers were inside of you.
they're inside of
Right.
us. They're not on the outside. Remember, the outer is a manifestation of the inner. So I was being forced to learn that my outer life was really a physical manifestation of my inner condition. And now here I was in the middle of my life falling apart. My inner condition, although I was not completely aware of it at the time, was being resurrected and brought back to life. I just couldn't see it. I came to understand that nothing had been done to me or to them, and that nothing is accidental, and that everything is serving the purpose of growth and expansion, as painful as it can be. But these two worlds in which we live, the horizontal and the vertical, cannot be separated. We live in both simultaneously. And when you feed the spiritual being that you are, the vertical, your outer world, your horizontal, is a primary beneficiary and will reveal that manifestation of that new inner condition.
And
That is a fact.
when we just move into resistance to what's happening in our visible world, what we can see, and we remain unaware of the dynamics of the invisible, the vertical, then we prolong our suffering, I think, exponentially.
And why it is so important to learn more about the truth of who we are, the spiritual nature of the true essence of who we are, and how we can become masters of our life.
In our next episode, we are going to dive even deeper into how to map these two worlds. But for this week, just kind of reflect on your own gyroscope. To which world are you devoting your time and energy? What is the force keeping your center steady?
And that's a tremendous question that we will speak to in the next episode. What is that dynamic that allows the gyroscope to stay erect and spinning at 1,000 miles an hour?
Thank you for joining us in Becoming You, and we will see you again next week.